What is going on, everybody? Kevin Calhoun here. Welcome to the Calhoun Show. I'm your host, Kevin Calhoun, and if you have been around this show for 114 episodes, and this is the 115th, if you've been around this podcast for a while, then you know part of the reasons why I do it. Number one, this podcast for the last almost 2.5 years now has served for me, to quote Bill Burr, for me, this podcast has served as a release valve for the desires that I have in my life. So I've been back in Connecticut now for almost 5 years since being a broadcasting major at Point Park University in Pittsburgh. And if you know me personally, or you've listened to this show long enough, you know at least enough about me to know that I haven't been doing what I want to be doing with my life to this point. And this podcast has really been a therapeutic reprieve from the daily life of not doing what I want to be doing and what I think I'm meant to be doing, whatever that means. And that brings me to today. Almost 5 years since leaving Pittsburgh in April of 2012. I have some cool news, actually, here on the podcast this week. For the first time in my adult life, I found out today that I am going to get paid to hold a microphone and talk about sports. And it's not a full-time gig. It's not the answer to the prayers that I have about this show or a version of it becoming something huge where I can talk sports on a daily basis and get paid a good amount of money and make a good living just talking sports. That's the dream for me. But I got the first step in that direction happened this week and in the past 2 weeks. And it's been a pretty amazing process just to be a part of. I'll tell you now what's going on. So I applied for a job 3 weeks ago with the Bridgeport Bluefish. It's a independent league baseball team here in Connecticut, obviously down in Bridgeport. So I applied to be their on-field in-game host / presenter type gig. If you've been to a live event before, we'll use baseball as the example because that's what I was applying for. It's the person between innings who has the microphone, who's going around the stadium. You know, got the kids on the field doing an event. You've got t-shirt giveaways, people, somebody notable in the crowd that's getting talked to by the host. That's the job. So I applied for it. And as part of the application process, you submit a video that basically proves that you know how to speak out loud and in full sentences and have some sort of charisma. And I got an email back from the Bluefish asking me to come in and read in an audition for the part, basically, for the job to be the on-field host. So I did that a week and a half ago. I went down to Bridgeport, read in front of 4 people. And basically, I was asked to simulate a race between the mascot and a kid, running from first to third for a little competition type thing, so the kind of thing that the job really entails. I went down, it went well. I'd never done anything like that before. I'm not an actor. I'm not a performer per se. I mean, technically, I guess I am, but I do everything based on my actual opinion, and there's nothing fake about it. So I don't know if it's technically a performance, what I'm doing here, or in any version of a podcast, or what I did in college, whether it was, calling games and things of that sort. And there's a story about calling games and people from college that I need to mention here in a moment. But and it actually ties into this pretty nicely too. So I went down to Bridgeport and I read for them, and I was hopeful. They told me that day that they were going to invite some people back to work a spring training game. So come in, do a couple of 2, 3, 4 things, whatever, simulate a real game scenario, and then they would take a look at whoever they invited back and make a decision based on that. And I didn't know what their plan was or anything along those lines. But after the audition, I felt okay, and I was hopeful to get the email, and I did. So the email said, can you come in on Monday, the 17th of April, and do a spring training game? And obviously my answer was yes. And it was a 10 a.m. game yesterday between them and Milford. And or Monday, excuse me. And I went in. It was a blast. It was honestly a blast. I went to a job interview in sneakers and sunglasses, and they handed me a jersey and a microphone. I mean, it was the greatest job interview I think I can ever have. So I get there, talking to the people that are, evaluating me and in charge of the process and in charge of all the in-game activities for Bridgeport. And I'm told what I'm going to be doing, which is a t-shirt toss, the YMCA, and a dress like a player event for the kids. So now it's a 10 a.m. spring training game on a Monday, the day after Easter. Not a huge crowd, not a huge crowd. So that was, and I knew that going in, knowing the time of the game. So that was going to be a bit of a challenge. So the t-shirt toss, I was nervous. I was nervous driving down there. It had been a while since I had talked in front of people and done anything like that. And my sister, who has been on this show 1,000 times, was the rock star that she always is. Talked to me on the phone when I was headed down there. Kept my nerves calm. Honestly, once I got in there and I had the mic, I was confident. I was happy. I was honestly just happy that somebody was actually giving me a chance with a microphone in my hand. And it was a blast. The t-shirt thing went great. The YMCA, we danced on the dugout for 15 people or whoever was in the crowd that day. And the two kids came out and ran up and down the first base line, putting on a big jersey and hat and all that stuff, and racing to race back to me to give me the high five. And I'm announcing the race and calling it. And it was honestly, I'm smiling thinking about it because it was a really cool experience. It was a lot of fun. And I got the news today that they were hiring two announcers to split the home games for the season. And I am lucky and honored enough to be one of those people. So I will be, anywhere between 30 to 40 something nights over the next 6 months down in Bridgeport, Connecticut, with a mic in my hand in front of a crowd, entertaining and doing fun things between innings and between half innings. And I can't stop smiling. I found out at 5 o'clock. I'm sitting here. I'm just getting down to do the podcast now. It's 9 o'clock on Wednesday evening. I've smiled for 4 hours straight, and I'm really happy. It's the first time. It's the first time in my life that somebody's going to pay me, and that part is so irrelevant, honestly, but that somebody is going to pay me and wants me holding a mic in my hand in front of a bunch of people. And, depending on sellouts or not, I don't know what the stadium holds, but it's a few thousand. So, it's pretty awesome. And I'm really, really, really excited about it. And to go along with what is a just absolutely stacked podcast with a lot of things happening, I had to wait. I had time this morning. I sat down. I did all the podcast prep. I had all the information, all the topics I wanted to cover, and all of those things ready to go. And I was getting ready to start. But I knew the email was going to come in this afternoon about the job. And for the last month, I've been waiting for this chance. I've been applying to jobs upon jobs, trying to break in. And for those of you that don't know the story, full disclosure, I try to do that on the show, and I keep my personal stuff because I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't say proud's not the right word. I'm not ashamed of what I do, but I'm not where I want to be. And this being the right step in that direction, I'll tell you what I was doing before. I worked at a lumber yard during the summers of college from 2008 to 2012, and then after doing a side project for a couple of years out of college, I had been back there for a couple of years, and it was 7 a.m. until the day was over, whether it was 3:30 or 5:30 or 7 o'clock. In some cases, it was a grind. And I love working outdoors. I loved doing that job, and that job for me was perfect for what I needed it for, which was Monday to Friday, no nights, no weekends job that I can focus on my podcast and I can focus on moving forward in the right direction. But I'm a person that has a passion for the projects that I'm doing, and I have a hard time changing my focus. And I decided about a month ago, little over, that turning 27, which I made the birthday references last week and had that whole conversation. Turning 27, which I did yesterday, I wasn't at a place at 26, turning 27, that I was happy with in my professional career. And I made the choice that if I was going to really force myself to do this and find something, that it was time to quit and not have a fallback plan. And I have been supported and helped along the way by first my mom, who beyond words has been helpful, both emotionally and financially for me in the last month. And I love her more than anybody on the planet Earth. And I could not be more appreciative of her. And everybody, and Stephanie and my dad and my brother and everybody around me has been phenomenal, really helping me and supporting me in what was a ballsy and probably stupid idea. But where I sit tonight, the smile's not disappearing. So I'm gonna roll with it for now. And they have been the best, and my family's awesome, and I love them all. So that said, we're in the middle of the playoffs. I've got the Bruins and Senators on the TV, the Capitals and Maple Leafs are on the return channel. I'm watching hockey. I'm watching basketball. These series are all underway. We have a lot of things to talk about. This podcast has a long way to go tonight, so let's get it going. And it's really going to start the only way it could, the way it ended last week, with one of my best friends, Kyle Gregoire, and his lovely fiancée, Sarah, left us a very quick, nice voicemail. And that is how we kick off the show this week. This is the Calhoun Show. Let's go.
Kevin, what is going on? Happy birthdays to you from Kyle
and Sarah.
Take care, buddy. Talk soon. Enjoy the podcast.
As always, you can follow the show on Twitter at Calhoun Show and email the show calhounshow@gmail.com. Like the show on Facebook and subscribe to the show on YouTube, where all the episodes are put up in their entirety. And if you want to listen to us on your mobile device, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And if you would be so kind to leave a 5-star rating and a nice review on iTunes, it helps push the show to more people. You can leave us a voicemail anytime, day or night, like Mr. KG and Sarah did at 860-740-2119 is the number to do that. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it is at ShutUpCalhoun. So, as I woke up this morning, preparing for the podcast, in my head, as I always do, I had, all of the different playoff scenarios going on in my head. I have the NBA, the NHL, the NFL draft is approaching. There's a couple other hockey stories. There's a baseball story or two that need to be touched on. And then there was the news that broke this morning out of Boston, and we all know what it is. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm not the first person to have this idea, but I feel this way, so I'm going to go along with it. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to say it's a sad day. I'm not going to say it's the sad, last sad chapter to a sad story. I'm not going to play any of that because I don't believe it. Aaron Hernandez committed suicide last night, and it doesn't affect me at all. Aaron Hernandez was a bad guy, and he got sent to prison for life for that reason. We weren't going to hear from him anyway. And as far as I could tell, he had no redeemable qualities based on anything I've ever read or heard about the guy. So, yeah, he did some bad shit. Really bad shit. And he's gone now. And okay, we move on. There's a lot of cool sports stories happening right now. If that's something that you want to let dominate your day, more power to you. But that's not why I'm here. That's not why I'm here. So we're going to move on. The NHL playoffs have been phenomenal. And I know the NBA draws better ratings, but if you're going to sit there and honestly try to convince me that the first round of the NBA playoffs is anywhere as close to as good as the first round of the NHL playoffs, I'll sit down. I'll have that conversation with you. Now, we're going to talk about both because there's a lot of things going on, but I just got to point that out. The NHL playoffs are second to none, and the first round matchups have been quality from almost from top to bottom. Even if you look at a series like Anaheim-Calgary, which has a chance to end tonight, those games have been close, and it could be 2-1 either way. It just happens to be 3-0 Calgary. And you see just different series being played. San Jose can't score. They can't keep up with Edmonton. They beat them 7-0. The Penguins win 3 straight games. It seems like Columbus is punching up, and then Columbus punches back and takes one at home. And I think that series is pretty much over, but it's interesting. It's interesting to watch. And what I did was went around the league and looked at all the matchups, and both in the NBA and the NHL, and wrote down one thought that I have coming out of that series. And I might skip a series here or there, but I've got most of the 16 here. So I figured that was the best way to kind of go through each series, give an interesting thought. But we don't need to break down the game film. We don't need to break down the highlights. That's not why we're here. So let's start in the NBA. And I want to start with Cleveland. They're going to beat Indiana. They're going to move on. They're going to be fine. I wonder if their defense is good enough to win a championship. I am still firmly of the belief that Cleveland will be in the final. I have little to no doubt about it. I have seen very little from the other Eastern teams that really scares me. I like what Washington is. I like what Toronto's crunch time is. We're going to talk about both of those teams in a minute. But overall, Cleveland is the best team in the East, and they should be in the NBA championship or in the NBA finals. I don't know if their defense is good enough to play with Golden State or whoever could be waiting for them in that matchup. They have time to figure it out. The big three look great. Hopefully J.R. Smith is healthy enough to play, but I worry for Cleveland in a month and a half. I don't worry for Cleveland tomorrow. I don't worry for Cleveland next week. But there are concerns. Boston's in trouble. Now, I don't know if I talked about it on the podcast last week, but I know I mentioned when I was talking to KG that our good friend Dan Condi was in studio with me last week just before the podcast was being recorded. He wasn't on the air. He was just here talking about something else. And we were discussing Boston and Chicago. Now, I don't know if I talked about this on the show, and if I didn't, you can call me a liar and maybe Dan will corroborate my story. But we were talking about that series, and I asked him how big a chance he thought Chicago had of upsetting Boston. And I didn't blame him when he said none. Now, the gigantic monkey wrench in all of this is obviously the tragic and horrendous news about Isaiah Thomas's sister, because that has affected Boston. And they're down 2-0. Both games lost at home. Chicago's in good shape. And I thought Boston was a team. And again, these are, I'm not, the analytics guy. I'm not breaking the tape down on the Boston Celtics. I'm not watching 82 Celtics games a year, but I follow enough people on Twitter and I listen to what I think are the right people. And I especially would say Bill Simmons is the right person when you're talking about the Celtics. And when you go into the playoffs as a team that shoots the three, but kind of lives and dies by it, but you're not one of the best 3-point shooting teams, then you're a team that I have suspect issues about. And they're playing against the team with Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade. And Dwayne Wade knows how to win playoff games, and he was the closer. I don't know if you watched that game. It wasn't that close, but he had dagger shots down the stretch last night. And Boston's in trouble. Boston's in a lot of trouble. The Memphis Grizzlies and the San Antonio Spurs has been just a hoot and a half with gigantic leads for both teams in games 1 and 2. And San Antonio coming away with both wins, but that wasn't the part that really stood out. What stood out was David Fizdale after the game last night, talking about the referees and their performance in the matchup. So if you didn't hear Fizdale's comments, he had a big issue with the number of free throws that were taken. He was citing the number of in the paint field goal attempts by his team versus the number of free throws awarded against San Antonio's free throw output versus their shots from the paint. He pointed out that Zach Randolph is the most rugged player in the game and barely shot any free throws. Kawhi Leonard had more free throw attempts than the entire Grizzlies roster in the game. So there were a lot of issues, and he was right. He was right, and he was talking about how Popovich is the old vet, and he's the rookie coach, and he doesn't want to get played like a rookie. And he was right. I didn't watch a ton of the game, but if you listen to those stats alone, and he goes, I'm not a numbers guy. You don't have to be. If you listen to those numbers, you don't have to be a numbers guy to know that something was wrong. Now, the NBA doesn't necessarily have a referee problem. The referees have never been great, but It's got to be better than that. And it's good of a coach, even if he got fined. I think the Grizzlies themselves fined him, so the NBA wouldn't have to. But either way, those are good things to have in the game, is those checks and balances, that kind of a system of checks and balances, because without something like that, these things just keep happening. So good for David Fizdale. They're, again, to use the same phrase, I've been loving this playoff season this year. They're punching out of their weight class a little bit, but they're battling, and we have a Gasol brother matchup, so who could complain? Let's go to Toronto. Toronto's crunch time lineup is juicy. Really, really fun. By the way, the series that I'm going to skip, I'm not going to talk a lot about Golden State. Not going to talk a ton about the Clippers, and you know why, because I just don't like them. And Atlanta, Milwaukee, neither of those teams is going anywhere. Or Atlanta. Did I say that right? Whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Toronto's crunch time lineup's great. Ibaka's been awesome. Obviously, the guards are who they are with the talent, and DeRozan's big shot late, Lowry's big shot late. Tucker was a phenomenal get by them. That's just a good team, and I give them a chance. And that's the thought I have about the Wizards as well. With the way Cleveland's defense looks so far, I give both of those teams a chance to beat them. Now, I'm not backing off of my statement, and I'm not trying to hedge my own bet. I expect Cleveland to be in the NBA Finals. I will be surprised, and I will be wrong if they're not. That said, that doesn't mean I can't be unsurprised if they lose. I think they're the best team, but they are flawed. And if Washington or Toronto somehow caught them multiple nights, they could beat them in a 7-game series. I think it's really unlikely. I think Washington and Toronto have a lot of upside and are going to continue to get better. And what Washington has done this year has been really, really impressive. And Toronto the same way, but Washington for sure, especially with what was expected of that team. These are teams on the rise, and Boston's a player away, and they're going to have a high draft pick. So the Eastern playoff race, to me, this year is exciting because of what we're looking at for next year, if that makes sense. I still think Cleveland's the class, but I don't know if that's the case 365 days from now, and that's why I'm really enjoying watching the Eastern Conference playoffs. One of the big arguments coming out of the West, and Golden State, I expect to win. San Antonio, I expect to win. In the Clippers series, I guess I expect the Clippers to win, but what can you really hope for? That's a flawed team. I think it's a flawed coach. At this point, I don't think things have to change. That big three is just not working. But the interesting series, whether or not it's going to play out that way. And by the way, Oklahoma City is up by 6 at halftime here in Game 2. As we talk, the MVP significance conversation that has been coming out of Game 1 between James Harden and Russell Westbrook in this Rockets-Thunder matchup has been just laughable. The MVP is a regular season award, and you can let it affect your judgment now as the playoffs go on if you would like to, if you want to argue that. The ballots are in already, so the conversation's not going to change as far as the official vote goes. But this doesn't matter for the MVP. It just doesn't. In the rules, it doesn't. And in my opinion, it does not. Because playoff basketball it's a different beast. And Russell Westbrook has been forced to do so much for that team. And maybe he can continue to do it. And I hope he does. And if he does, he just continues, I guess. If you want to say that it matters, he continues to prove this MVP performance. He had the MVP performance. He put them in the playoffs. He put them where they're at now. And he was phenomenal. And if James Harden's team, which is a better team, knocks him out, and you want to cost him the MVP because of that, in your opinion, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, you have every right to do that, but I'm going to have every right to disagree with you. So those are my NBA thoughts in round one. Obviously, round one will continue over the next week. We'll talk a little bit more about it as the show goes on, but we'll switch gears and we'll talk a little bit here about the Stanley Cup playoffs. Here we go.
The Calhoun Show.
All right, so the Stanley Cup playoffs have been great, and they're just going to keep getting better. So when I looked at the matchups, I was excited. I liked 7 of them, to be completely honest with you. The St. Louis, Minnesota one didn't do much for me. And The outcome, I guess, is surprising people. Minnesota's a flawed team, and there's no one on that team that you expect to win a game for you. And I know Zach Parise and Ryan Suter are making a gajillion dollars over the next gajillion years by that team, and you know what? That's fine. Enjoy it, Minnesota. But I didn't really get that. I didn't really get it. So that series doesn't really blow me away. However, the rest of them have been phenomenal. So let's start with my boys, my team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, Matt Murray gets hurt. Pre-game warm-ups, game 1. Marc-Andre Fleury gets the nod, wins game 1, game 2 at home, wins game 3 in Columbus, and then they drop game 4. By the way, as we sit here, it looks as though the Boston Bruins have scored a goal to go up 1-0 on Ottawa, and perhaps not. Oh, I think they're reviewing if it's onside or not. I think they're going to call it offside. So I guess that goal's coming back. Anyway, Fleury gets the nod, gets to play the first 4 games of the series. He's up 3-1. I don't know what the plan is for the Penguins going into game 5. However, this series is not as close as 3-1 would suggest. The Penguins are a way better team than Columbus. However, Columbus has a lot of fight, a lot of fire, and they played really well in game 4. But the Penguins' third line is better than Columbus's first. And when that's the case, it comes down to defense. The thing about the Penguins that scares me moving forward is the defense. And it's not their ability to stop plays. It's their ability to create them going the other way. Justin Schultz has been a revelation for the Penguins since bringing him in from Edmonton last year. He's been great. He's going to get paid big money, whether it's by Pittsburgh or by another team here in the offseason. You look at Brian Dumoulin, how far Ian Cole has come along in his career. There's been a lot of positive things going for the Penguins. Ron Hainsey scored a goal last night for him, the 39-year-old first-time Stanley Cup playoff participant here. Ole Mata, I don't know if he's tabled off in his progression, but he's been good. It's an okay defense. Chris Letang makes it something completely different. He doesn't quite open up what Erik Karlsson does, but it's pretty close. And he's going to be missed by the Penguins moving forward. I don't fear for the Penguins' playoff lives against Columbus, but I wonder about the rounds moving forward. And staying in the East, and speaking of Erik Karlsson, and speaking of the game that I have on the TV right now, if you haven't seen the 2 plays that Karlsson made, first the one to Brassard for the game-tying goal the other night, and then the outlet pass to Hoffman for his breakaway, which he scored on the Forsberg, which was dirty as hell. It was awesome. If you haven't gotten a chance, if Ottawa-Boston kind of bores you, and I guess on the surface it can, just with the who's involved in it, don't sleep on getting chances to watch Erik Karlsson play hockey. If you're doing that, you're doing yourself a disservice, because he is just a blast. I can't get enough of watching him. Staying in the East, the game that one of the games that's on right now, which I guess I can flip back to if I'm going to be talking about it. At last check, it was 4-2. Between the Capitals and the Maple Leafs. It would appear that is still the score as the game. Let's see, I'm loading it up now. They're in the third period with about 14 minutes, something like that left. Washington looking to even the series up at 2. Toronto's making this fun, and Toronto has been compared to the Penguins from 2007 to 2008, the team that lost to the Red Wings in the final, in the fact that they're just kind of young and dumb and don't really know that they're not supposed to win right now. I've seen a bunch of people make that comparison to that Penguin team, which is really interesting. I don't think that they're going to beat the Capitals. I think the Capitals are going to put a scare into their fans. The greatest thing I've seen on Twitter in the last week, and this is another thing that I can load up here, was a tweet about the Washington Capitals after they had lost in overtime to Toronto the other night. And the tweet comes from at John Bernhardt. Nathan Bernhardt's the account's name. Anyway, he wrote, "The Capitals exist to entertain everyone except their own fans, who they are constantly trying to murder," which is pretty much 100% true. And I think they'll survive the Maple Leafs, but Toronto's been fun, and if they can build the defense, they're going to have a good future ahead of them. That's not the only team I'm going to say that about either. Last one in the East is Montreal and New York. Now, Montreal took the chance to bring in Radulov. He's been phenomenal for them. Shea Weber's been really, really good. Yet they still find themselves 2-2 with the Rangers, who have played not their best hockey so far. Now, Montreal holds home ice, tied at 2. They've got 2 games at the Bell Center if they need them. New York has been bad at home and good on the road. So what do you really expect in the last 3 games here? What I expect is for a playoff coach who specializes in shutting down series on the defensive end, to be able to do that against a team that struggles offensively. I think Claude Julien is one of the best coaches in hockey at looking at a series and pinching it down to 1 game. And I mean 1 game at a time. I don't necessarily even mean a game 7. So I would expect Montreal to be tight as hell defensively and try to win a 2-1 hockey game. And New York's a team that struggles to score at times. And if they can't get Zuccarello going, if they can't get Kreider's wheels really moving, if they can't get Zibanejad and Grabner or Stepan or Nash or all of these guys to really get going, and I know Nash has 13 in his last 13, so he's been pulling his weight a little bit, but you need more. You need more if you're the Rangers, and you can't expect Lundqvist to steal another game for you. And I think for them to win the series, Lundqvist will have to steal at least 1, and I don't know if he's going to be able to do that because Carey Price is the goalie between the pipes on the other end. Let's go to the West now, and the most surprising one so far, Nashville 3-0 up on the Blackhawks. And I gave Nashville a shot, but I didn't give them this good a shot. One of my good buddies, Mark, who has been a longtime listener of this podcast, he and I went out the other night for game 1. We watched the first 2 periods out at the bar of Chicago and Nashville. And I asked him as a Blackhawks fan what his worry level was. And I gauged it at 40. I said, where do we at with Nashville? Like 40%? He said higher. And he said it with purpose too. He was right, because this is a really good team. And they're not afraid of Chicago anymore. They've been down this road, and it just seems as if this was the moment that was just like, yeah, F these guys. Honestly, like, this is enough. And they've been great so far. I don't know if they close out necessarily at home in game 4 if they can sweep Chicago, but if they can, that's a hell of a statement. It's a hell of a statement early on. Let's see, who do we want to go to next? Let's go to Edmonton and San Jose. So Edmonton's so fast and so young. The defense is flawed. Cam Talbot is really, really good up until he wasn't last night. San Jose reminds me of what Washington is right now. And I know San Jose has been compared to Washington a lot over the last few years, and that's been fair, and it has had to go away a little bit because San Jose made the final last year, so a little more credit there because Washington hasn't done anything of the sort to this date yet. This feels like Washington-Toronto. This feels like a young team just kind of swinging for the fences, and they've connected a couple of times. And they can keep swinging, and maybe one of the 2 of them can land some kind of a crazy knockout and knock off one of these 2 top teams here with Washington and San Jose. But I wouldn't expect either of those things to happen. I think San Jose is a better team than Edmonton. They're older, they're smarter, they're just more experienced, and I expect them to win, just as I do the Capitals. Calgary and Anaheim. I said it before. I think this series could be closer than it is. It's the series I've watched the least of, so I'll spend the least time on it. That was a brutal one the other night in Calgary. Giving that one up and going down 3-0 was tough. It was tough, and it's going to be a very, very, very difficult thing to bounce back from, especially as a young team. And I'm like you. By the way, Toronto just made it 4-3. Looks like Austin Matthews on the board here. I'm like you. I could do without Anaheim. They don't excite me. Ryan Getzlaf, Corey Perry, about as boring as superstars come in the playoffs unless you're talking about Minnesota. But it'll be interesting to see if they have a little bit of fight left in them, and hopefully they can get 1 or 2. But the playoffs have been great. They really have. And if you're not a hockey fan, or if you're a fringe hockey fan and you haven't been paying attention, give it a shot. I mean, I'm hoping Toronto can put up another one here, tie this at 4, and make this a really interesting game moving into the 3rd period. But you can't do anything better than the Stanley Cup playoffs. The only other hockey story I wanted to mention was a report that didn't have a lot of corroboration this morning, but it came from a couple of sources that was out on I saw it on The Score. It's been on a few different hockey sites. Is that Jack Eichel has no interest in signing an extension if Dan Bylsma remains the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I don't know what you want to do with that information. As a Penguins fan, I know Dan Bylsma pretty well. as a coach at least. And yeah, I'm surprised to hear that from a young player because Bilesma loves himself some young players. Here and there, he loves himself some young players, but then again, he employed Craig Adams on his fourth line for a few years. So I don't know if Bilesma is the problem in Buffalo, but Jack Eichel is the solution. So you better follow what that kid wants. That's the only thing I got to say. All right, we got a couple more things to do, and then I'm getting out of here. It's kind of late. I'm pretty excited. I think we're going to pour a glass of whiskey and celebrate tonight. So let's take a break for a second. We'll finish this thing up. It's Calhoun Show.
The Calhoun Show.
All right, before we wrap this thing up, there are a couple of NFL stories. Yes, my friends, the NFL is still a thing. It still exists, and it's still in our lives. So there's a couple of NFL stories that I have to get to, and two of them are New York Giant related. How about that for a tease? All right, so let's go here. Hard Knocks is on its way to Tampa Bay. And there's an interesting story on NFL.com about the things that are interesting about watching Tampa Bay on Hard Knocks. Here's what I want to see. I'm excited to see the quarterback room there with Jameis Winston and his growth. I think this is a super competitive young defense, and the position battles on the defense should be a lot of fun to watch. This is actually a really cool Hard Knocks for me. I think this one's fun. By the way, 5-3 Capitals just went up with 7 minutes left in the third. This is a fun Hard Knocks for me. We've gotten so many bad. Honestly, we've gotten so many bad teams on Hard Knocks, and now that we actually are going to get a team that might be on the verge of starting to make playoff runs. Could be interesting. Roberto Aguayo versus Nick Folk. I think this is the reason that they picked Tampa Bay. It's a kicker battle, and it's a kicker battle to the death if you follow Nick Folk's Twitter, which is funny. The Deshaun Jackson addition to this team is interesting. I don't know anything. I'll be honest. I don't know anything about Dirk Cutter. I don't listen. I've never heard him talk. That's always my favorite thing. I found myself in love with Bill O'Brien after the Texans Hard Knock feature. I found myself just so sick of Jeff Fisher that it was beyond comprehension. It can go either way, but I'll be interested to see what Dirk Cutter brings to the table to Hard Knocks. So that'll be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to that. We talked about Hernandez early in the show. A couple of Giants stories. So number one, Eli Manning is in trouble, or at least is a part of a scandal, which is kind of weird to say, but it's the truth. So if you're unfamiliar with the story, here's what happened. Eli Manning was a part of, apparently, a scheme to sell equipment under the false pretense that it was game-used equipment. Okay, so that's the long and the short of it. This is game used, spend your money on it. It wasn't really game used, but somebody spent their money on it. That's the point. People are coming to Eli's defense here about how, what are these transactions worth? Maybe it's a $4,500 helmet. Eli's a $140 million quarterback, whatever the hell he is, right? He's got money out the wazoo. He's a Manning. He's fine. He doesn't need $4,500 or whatever his cut would have been out of that. So that's the easy defense of Eli Manning. And a lot of Giants fans, like myself, like I am, I'm not making this excuse, but a lot of Giants fans are. Here's the point that I have come out of this. I would expect that Eli Manning probably has some kind of just emotional attachment to his equipment. And if he's got a game used helmet, he wants to keep it. The dishonesty comes in with, now you're talking about being greedy. Instead of saying there is no Eli Manning equipment available, Eli is saying, find me a helmet that can pass as game used. That's bad. You can't do that. It's not about being greedy just for the money itself. I think it's about being a little selfish with the equipment, but then not realizing how stupidly greedy what he's doing is. Maybe he realizes it, but it's so dumb that it's inexcusable. And if it's true and he gets suspended, fine. That's dumb. And I said that the other day, and one of my friends was shocked. He's like, "You're a Giants fan. It's Eli. He hasn't missed a start since 2004. What do you?" He's my quarterback. He's not my friend. If he did something stupid, he should get in trouble for it. And even as a Giants fan that doesn't like the Patriots, I'm not saying that to justify any Patriot suspensions over the last 4 years, because I'm not sure any of them were relevant or necessarily coherent. But if Eli did something dumb and it in the rule book says that he should get suspended, then fine. Whatever. I don't think it'll happen. This seems like an out-of-court settlement and a move on, but whatever. We'll see what happens. The other Giants story, and this is a little more centralized to New York. I don't know if this was a national story. I know people are listening to this everywhere, but, well, not necessarily everywhere, but in a bunch of different places. But Odell Beckham had a Odell Beckham player camp or something at MetLife Stadium the other night, and it was scheduled from 5:30 to 7:30. He showed up at 7 o'clock and left at 8:15. And he skipped an event that he was scheduled for and paid for earlier in the offseason. Now, I understand that Odell Beckham is in a position that I could never possibly understand, if that makes sense. Like, I know that I don't know what his life is like. He's a great player on my favorite pro sports team. He's the best player on my favorite pro sports team. I root for him, but I also have the conscience and the wherewithal to know that this is a 24-year-old kid, and he's doing a lot of dumb stuff, and he's getting a lot of shit in New York for it. And you can start with his on-field actions over the last 2 years. You can talk about the boating experience that he had with the rest of the wide receiver core. You can talk about missing an event he was paid for. You can talk about showing up to an event late that had to do with kids who were, there to see Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham is one of my cousins. He's a young kid growing up in a Patriots household, but every time I've ever thrown the ball to him, he wants to catch the ball like Odell Beckham. He wants to catch it like Odell. So, this is the hero to kids right now in the NFL. At least he's one of them. And that's shitty to not show up, or to show up that late because he was late because he was at Coachella is why he was late. His plane was late. So it's really dumb, and hopefully he gets it. But if you're somebody that gets bent out of shape about this kind of thing, I mention it because it's a news story, and I like to just make sure I mention things that are relevant. But 24-year-old, I'm 27 and I have a hard time. So, and I have nowhere near the responsibilities that guy has. So, give him a break. Give him a break. He'll figure it out. And honestly, I think Brandon Marshall is going to be great for him this year. Really do. At least I'm hopeful. The last NFL thing I want to talk about is the rookie quarterbacks. So you can start this conversation any number of ways, whether it's the Browns' number one pick and the fact that it feels like they're shopping it to teams that might be looking for a quarterback, whether it's that teams have maybe expressed interest in trading up for that pick because they are going for a quarterback. In the end, you just find yourself looking at the quarterbacks available and you're saying, who are they trading up to get? And at what spot do they plan on getting him? Because this quarterback draft class, depending on who you ask, is, nobody belongs in the first round. We're going to see a run on quarterbacks in the top 24. It just doesn't add up. And it never does, because quarterbacks are so important in the NFL. Teams just seem to reach, and I guess it's fair for us to expect that to happen again, but there's no way to know. And I make fun of the mock drafts all the time. So let's look at the latest one just for shits and giggles, right? We'll look at Lance Zierlein's latest mock draft. He has the first quarterback coming off the board at 10. He has Mitchell Trubisky from North Carolina going to Buffalo at the 10 spot. Seems to me that if people think a quarterback's going in the first round, it's usually just one, maybe two. Zierlein has Deshaun Watson going to Houston. That would be the one team that I would almost guarantee takes a quarterback just because they really need one. Kansas City taking Patrick Mahomes from Texas Tech at 27. And that is all he's got for quarterbacks in the first round. Those are the three that everybody's talking about. from what I read and what I gather and the experts that I trust, it doesn't seem like any of these guys are first round talent. It really doesn't. Houston's a team that needs a quarterback. So I would understand them maybe reaching for a guy. But if all three of those quarterbacks go in the first round, I think there's going to be two unhappy fan bases down the line. Maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, I don't know. I'm not judging these guys based on any level of expertise, but it just feels like, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, if these are quarterbacks that don't necessarily belong in the first round and they go there anyway, you might be passing up a player that you could do better with. And that seems to be where we're headed. And it's a place that we've been before, but who knows? And there's wild card teams in there too. You look at the Jets. What do they think of Petty and Hackenberg? If they take a quarterback in the first or second round, are they just completely admitting that Hackenberg was a terrible idea and a terrible investment? It feels that way. So that's it. That's the podcast for this week. This has been a lot of fun, and it was a cool day. And there's a lot of cool things happening. And one other big thing in the family, but I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it yet. So I will hold it. And the person who's listening to this knows what I'm talking about. And a special congratulations that I've already said. But we will talk about it once that becomes more public knowledge, I guess. It's cool stuff. Really cool. And I'll call it show related, even though it's not. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you for all the support over the last couple of years. This show's not going anywhere. I told you about Bridgeport. It's awesome. I have another cool thing coming down the line here pretty shortly that I'm really jacked up about. And it involves somebody else that you guys know really well. So all of these things are coming and more. And I'm super excited about it. So thank you again for the support. And I will talk to you guys next week. See ya.
Thank you for listening to The Calhoun Show. Join the conversation by following the show on Twitter @Calhoun Show and emailing the show at calhounshow@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe and download for free on iTunes. Want to hear yourself on the show? Leave us a voicemail by calling 860-740-2119.